I was excited to explore an old mining town. It was a few weeks ago and I needed fresh content. I drove for hours until I reached the town just before dusk. The sunlight hung over the mountains and everything felt quiet. It was too quiet. I parked and started walking around. I checked into a small motel nearby. My room was old and the walls peeled. I was about to sit down when I heard knocking. At first I thought it was a weird pipe or an animal. It was eerie, but curiosity got the best of me. I decided to go back to the town after dark. I left my motel around midnight. The shadows felt alive as I walked down the streets. I stopped in front of the old tavern. There were flickering lights inside. I hesitated. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. My heart raced as I stepped toward the door. I entered the tavern. The air was heavy and thick. Chairs were not aligned properly, like someone had been there recently. I figured it was just the wind. I took pictures, but the whispers I thought I heard made me uneasy. I told myself to relax. It was just an old building. The next day was strange. I found my camera in a different spot than where I left it. Confused, I thought maybe I was just forgetful. I wandered deeper into the town and saw symbols scratched into the walls. I felt sick to my stomach. They weren't there yesterday. I tried to brush it off. The town was just old. I planned to leave before sunset. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I spotted a shadow darting past. I turned quickly but saw nothing. My skin prickled and a cold sweat broke out. I realized I was not alone. Then I saw it. A figure stood still in the darkness watching me. I felt frozen. I didn't know what to do. As I stared, the figure whispered something I couldn't hear. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I stared at the figure, trying to make sense of it. It was wearing ragged clothes. I felt an urge to approach, but something stopped me. Then the whispers grew louder, swirling around in my ears. I turned to run, and suddenly I was lost in the maze of buildings. The air felt cooler. I dashed through the town, glancing back, but there was nothing behind me. My breathing was heavy, loud in the silence. As I pushed forward, I swear I could feel something looming behind me. I could hear footsteps. I ran into the old bakery. The door slammed shut behind me. I leaned against the wall, my chest heaving. I glanced around. The room looked untouched, but I felt eyes on me. I wanted to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. I started to panic. The whispers were now inside my head. They seemed to echo off every wall. I finally pushed at the door again. It swung open hard, almost knocking me over. I bolted out, but saw the figure right in front of me this time, blocking my path. I gasped, backing up. It opened its mouth and the whispers turned into a deafening roar. I turned and ran again. I didn't stop until I reached my car. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The figure stood at the edge of the town, watching me leave. I never looked back again. Chapter 2. The Return. I didn't know what to think after I got home. My heart still raced each time I remembered the figure. I scrolled through the photos I'd taken, hoping to find a clue, something that made sense. Instead, all I saw were shadowy shapes that seemed to twist when I didn't look directly at them. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me back. Days passed, but I felt a pull back to that town. I couldn't just leave it behind like that. I needed to understand what had happened. So I planned a return trip, armed with new gear and a stronger resolve. I drove back, the road familiar yet daunting. The landscape opened up as I approached the town. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the buildings. I parked with my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. The evening felt charged, and the weight of my previous experience hung in the air. I stepped out of the car. The silence enveloped me, deeper and more unsettling than before. I felt the eyes of the town upon me. I wouldn't let fear win this time. I took a deep breath and walked towards the old tavern. As I entered, the ambience was different. The whispers from before were gone, replaced by an ominous silence. I felt the familiar chill wash over me. I moved deeper into the tavern, flashlight scanning the corners. That's when I noticed something out of place. There, on the dusty floor, was a series of footprints, small, almost childlike. They led towards the back door that I knew had been locked during my last visit. I hesitated, feeling the cold air push against me. A voice in my head told me to leave, but the other half urged me on. I followed the prints, clutching my flashlight tightly. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow alley behind the tavern. The walls were damp, covered in more of those strange symbols. They felt familiar, like something from a nightmare. Instinctively, I stepped back, but then I spotted a small figure peeking around the corner. I'm not sure how long I stood there, frozen. It was small and wore tattered clothing. The longer I looked, the clearer it became that it was a child. That realization sent a chill down my spine. What was a child doing out here in the dark? "Help me," the child whispered, voice barely audible. I felt a rush of panic. "Where are your parents?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. The child didn't answer. Instead, he gestured down the alley, encouraging me to follow. A shiver ran through me, but I walked toward him, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. The air grew thick, and the whispers returned, echoing all around. As I ventured deeper, the child turned and disappeared into shadows. I hesitated. Then I heard a strange noise like a low growl. My heart raced as I spun around, but there was no one there. Suddenly, everything went dark. The lights flickered off, plunging me into darkness. My breath quickened as I felt a cold presence behind me. The intensity of the situation hit me. I was not alone, and this time, something wanted me to stay. Chapter 3. Shadows and Echoes. I stood frozen in the dark, heart pounding like a drum. The cold presence loomed behind me, heavy and oppressive. I couldn't tell what it was, but I felt it sifting through the shadows. I wanted to turn and run, but my feet felt glued to the wet ground. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no answer except for a faint rustling. I slowly turned, my flashlight flickering to life again. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the alley. My eyes darted wildly, and that's when I saw it. A scurrying movement, disappearing around a corner. Was it the child, or something else? I took a hesitant step forward, determined to find out. The child's plea echoed in my mind. I couldn't leave without understanding what was happening. With each step, the whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Then I saw it. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift. They writhed as though alive. I reached out to touch one, and a sharp pain shot through my hand. It felt like a jolt of electricity. I stumbled back. I could hear the whispering now, words I couldn't understand, tumbling over each other in a frantic rush. Ignoring the pain, I pushed through, following the footsteps again. I rounded the corner and entered a deeper part of the alley, where the walls closed in, pressing me. Suddenly the child appeared again, standing further down the passage, looking back at me with wide eyes. "Come on," he urged, his voice clearer now, filled with desperation. I hesitated, scanning my surroundings. The cold presence was still behind me, lurking, but I couldn't ignore the child. I followed him, my heart racing with fear and urgency. He led me to a small hidden door, barely visible in the shadows. "In here, quick." My hesitation was quickly drowned out by the growing noise behind me, a low rumbling that sounded almost like whispers, but darker, more threatening. I grabbed the doorknob and flung the door open, stepping inside without looking back. The small room was dark, the only light coming from cracks in the walls. I heard the door slam shut behind me. The child was gone. Panic surged again. "What is happening? Where are you?" I shouted, but my voice felt small in the cramped space. I turned to scan the room. Old, dusty furniture littered the space, and a table sat in the center with an old lantern. I stumbled towards it, fumbling for the light. Just as I found the lantern and struck a match, I heard soft, hurried footsteps outside. They were closing in. I lit the lantern just in time to see faint outlines creeping toward the door. My breath caught in my throat. Then the whispers intensified, merging with the sounds of footsteps. I was trapped, and the shadowy figures loomed closer. I needed to figure out my next move, quickly. That's when I noticed something glinting on the table. It was a small, dusty key. Maybe it was the answer I needed, but to find out I would have to confront what was outside. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. The darkness had come alive, and I was about to discover just how deep its secrets ran. Chapter 4. The Key and the Door. I stood in the tiny room, the flickering lantern casting long shadows on the walls. The sound of footsteps outside sent shivers down my spine. My instincts screamed at me to hide or run, but the key in my hand felt heavy and significant. I had to know what it unlocked. I quickly scanned the room for an exit, but there were no windows, just one door. I could still hear the whispers, an unsettling mix of urgencies that seemed to weave together a message just out of reach. I took a step toward the door, the key clutched tightly in my palm. Before I could think too much, I approached the door and tried the handle. It was locked. My breath quickened. Did they know I was in here? I inserted the key into the lock. Would it turn? With a click, the lock released. I breathed out a sigh of relief. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to escape. But as I turned the knob and pulled the door open, a chill rushed in, snaking around my legs. The alley was empty, but it felt dangerously alive. The shadows breathed around me, stretching endlessly, and I felt the weight of the cold presence gone but lingering just outside my vision. I took a cautious step into the alley, forcing myself to scan every corner. "Where did you go?" I whispered, speaking to both the child and the shadows lingering in the periphery. I felt awash with uncertainty. Did I really want to find the child, or was I just as curious about what lurked in the darkness? I moved deeper into the alley, drawn once again to the symbols on the walls. The whispers had quieted but did not disappear. Instead, they twisted in my mind, compelling me to touch the carvings again. I hesitated, recalling the pain from earlier, but something urged me on. As I reached towards the nearest symbol, it began to shine faintly, pulsating like a heartbeat. My fingers connected with its surface, and to my astonishment, images danced before my eyes. Scenes of a past long hidden, a village overrun with shadows, a child lost in fear. Then the images vanished and I staggered back, breathless and disoriented. I turned to leave, but before I could step away, I felt the air shift behind me. Someone, or something, was there. I whirled around, but only glimpsed movement skittering away, just out of the reach of my lantern's light. Panic surged through me again, and I bolted after it, clutching the key tightly. The alley twisted and turned, mirroring my growing dread and desperation. The child's voice rang out again, louder now. "Help!" The sound pulled me forward. I could feel the energy of the place shifting beneath my feet, almost vibrating with anticipation. I chased the echoes of his plea, but the shadows closed in, wrapping tighter around me. That's when I saw him, a small figure standing at the far end of the passage, but he wasn't alone. A towering shadow loomed behind him, a silhouette writhing as if made of smoke. "Run!" I shouted, but my voice didn't carry far enough. I sprinted toward the child, the key pressed hard against my palm, the whispers rising to a deafening crescendo. I was rushing headlong into something I might not be able to escape. But I had to save him. I had to know what awaited me. And there was no turning back now. Chapter 5. The Chase. I could barely believe my eyes as I raced toward the child. He was small, maybe no older than 6, clutching something tightly to his chest. As I got closer, I noticed the shadow behind him was no longer just looming. It was moving. The smoky figure shifted, twisting like tendrils of fog, and its presence chilled the air. "Come on!" I shouted desperately to the child, but he stood frozen, paralyzed by fear. The shadow advanced, and I felt the ground beneath my feet tremble, as if the very essence of this alley was warning me to turn back. The whispers flared again, chaotic and urgent. "Save him!" they cried. But I didn't know how. My heart felt like it was trying to break free from my chest. I was practically flying now, pushing everything within me toward that boy. Just as I reached him, the shadow lunged. I threw myself into the child, my arms wrapping around him, hoping I could shield him. We both fell to the ground as the shadow missed its mark. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, but I was not about to let go. I had a key in my pocket, and I had to believe it had a purpose. "Get up," I urged, urgently glancing back at the dark figure that was quickly regaining its form. The child's eyes were wide, filled with tears, but he nodded and scrambled to his feet. I pulled him with me, my other hand still clutching the key. "Which way?" I asked him, but the alley seemed to twist endlessly before us. "Through there." He pointed to a narrow split in the wall, barely visible in the shadows. Without hesitating, I followed his lead. We dove into the cramped passage, squeezing through the opening just as the shadow poured into the alley behind us. The new passage felt suffocating, the air thick and heavy. I could still sense the darkness pursuing us. We ran in silence. It was all I could do to keep my mind focused. With every step, I felt the shadows creeping closer. I pressed against the wall, squeezing my eyes shut for a brief moment, praying for strength. As we turned a corner, I noticed a faint light at the end of the tunnel. "There!" I exclaimed, urging the child forward. Suddenly the path shifted beneath me. A chill ran up my spine as I stumbled. I glanced back, seeing the shadow still barreling through the corridor. I couldn't let it reach us. We had to get to that light. With renewed determination, I pulled the child along and we dashed for the light. The closer we got, the more the whispers transformed into screams, filling my ears with an unrelenting clamor. But then something changed again. The light flickered and expelled shadows of its own, creating a boundary between us and the darkness. Just as we reached it, the shadow lashed out, its fingers almost grazing my arm. I jumped through the light. The moment I crossed over, everything went silent. The child and I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. We were in an open space, a forgotten courtyard filled with wild grass and stone ruins. I pushed myself up, but my gaze was drawn to the imposing figure of the shadow standing at the edge of the light, simmering with fury. "What are you?" I whispered, as the child clung to my side, breathless and trembling. And in that moment, a new realization hit me. I hadn't just found the child. I had stepped into something much deeper, something older than I could comprehend. Before I could ask another question, the child pointed, his voice shaking. "What's that?" There at the center of the courtyard, an ancient door stood partially open. Intricate symbols covered its surface, gleaming faintly. The key in my pocket felt like it was burning against my skin. With a mixture of fear and anticipation, I turned to the child. "We need to find out," I said. But deep down, I wondered if stepping through that door was the right move. That shadow was still watching, waiting, and I didn't know how much longer we had. Chapter 6. The door. The courtyard felt eerily still, like a breath held before the plunge. I could feel the weight of the shadow behind me, its malevolent presence pressing against my back. The child and I stood frozen, staring at the door that seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. "Should we go in?" the boy asked, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. My gut twisted with uncertainty. What was behind that door? I glanced back at the shadow. It was lurking just out of reach, but I knew it wouldn't wait much longer. "Listen," I said, crouching to look the child in the eyes. "We have to be brave. If we stay here, that shadow will get us. But if we go through that door—" I hesitated. "I don't know what will happen, but we might find safety." He nodded, still clutching the object to his chest. Whatever it was, it seemed important to him. I took a deep breath, and with a shaky hand, I reached for the door. With a simple push, it creaked open, revealing darkness inside. The lingering whispers from before bubbled back to life, wrapping around us like a fog. "What's in there?" the boy asked, his small frame trembling. "I guess we're about to find out," I replied, pushing aside my fear. I wanted to protect him, but I could feel my own trepidation clawing at me. As we stepped through the threshold, the air turned dense and cold. Light flickered overhead, illuminating what looked like an ancient chamber. Dust motes danced in the dim glow. I scanned the room, noticing strange symbols lining the walls, symbols that matched those on the door. This was a place of significance. "What is this place?" the child whispered. "I don't know," I admitted, but a sudden thought struck me. The key. I pulled it from my pocket, feeling its warmth again. It felt connected to everything around us. The room was filled with artifacts, faded paintings, cracked vessels, and remnants of times long past. They each told a story, and I felt their weight. I turned back to the door, now just a frame bathed in light. The shadow lingered at its threshold, half hidden but undeniably present. Then something caught my eye. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, holding a small orb that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. My heart raced. "We should check that out," I suggested. As we approached, the orb pulsed rhythmically. I reached out, but before my fingers could graze its surface, a harsh growl disrupted the silence, echoing through the chamber. "Get back!" I shouted, yanking the child to my side. The shadow moved now, slithering forward, its edges sharpening. It was no longer waiting, it was coming for us. The orb's glow intensified, filling the room with a blinding light. My instincts screamed to run, but curiosity held me in place. What if this was our escape? What if it could defeat the shadow? "Please don't," the boy whimpered, clutching onto my arm. I could feel its rage radiating from behind. There was no more time for questions. As the shadow lunged forward, I made a snap decision. I dove for the orb, hand outstretched. That's when I saw it, an outline of a door forming in the back of the chamber. Another way out. "This way," I yelled to the child, but the orb shimmered even more, wrapping us in light, and I felt the pull of an ancient power. Then everything went dark. Chapter 7. The Awakening. I blinked. Light filtered through the haze, blinding at first. I rubbed my eyes, trying to make sense of my surroundings. The air was thick and warm, and I could feel the ground beneath me, a solid surface, not the dampness of the chamber we had just left. "Are we safe?" The boy's voice tore through my confusion. I turned to him. He looked disoriented, eyes wide, as if he was trying to piece together what had just happened. "I think so," I replied, still searching for the orb. But it was gone. Instead, we stood in a different space. The walls were now lined with aged timber, and the air smelled of pine and earth. Old photographs hung at odd angles, their faces ghostly and blurred. A chill ran down my spine. "Where are we?" I wondered aloud. The boy pointed toward an open door at the far end of the room. "There," he said, voice trembling. "Maybe we can find a way out." I hesitated, but the shadow's menacing growl echoed in my mind, forcing me to act. I took his hand, and we moved cautiously toward the door. Each step felt heavy with uncertainty. As I approached, a sudden noise made me halt, a whisper, familiar yet unnerving. It flickered against the walls like a low flame. The boy flinched beside me. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," I whispered back, not wanting to draw attention. The whisper separated into distinct voices floating around us. I stepped through the doorway, and we found ourselves in a hallway lined with dusty portraits. Each face appeared to watch us, eyes following our movements. My pulse quickened. "Let's keep moving," I urged. We walked quietly, the whispers growing more defined but still unintelligible. My heart raced. Were these spirits trapped here, willing us to join them? I could feel the fear creeping back in. Suddenly the temperature dropped. I could see my breath. "What's happening?" the boy said, fear rising in his voice. "I don't know," I responded, glancing back down the hallway. I could have sworn I saw a figure at the end, a dark silhouette waiting. "Run!" I shouted as I yanked the boy forward. We barreled down the hall, our footsteps pounding against the wooden planks. Then, out of nowhere, a door slammed shut behind us, isolating us from whatever had pursued. I stumbled, heart pounding, and crashed against the opposite wall. The boy was clinging to my arm, terrified. "We need to find another way out," I urged, pulling him along. I felt the walls closing in as we moved deeper into the unknown. Ahead, a staircase spiraled down into darkness. It was our only option. "We have to go down," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The pulsating dread from the shadow still lingered in my mind, urging me to escape. As we descended, the air thickened. The whispers transformed. "Help us." The words were clearer now, sharp and laced with despair. I stumbled to a stop. "Did you hear that?" I looked at the boy, my chest tight with anxiety. He nodded, eyes wide with fear, his grip on my arm tightened. "What do they want?" he mumbled. I swallowed hard. "I don't know, but I have a feeling we'll find out soon enough." With one last deep breath, I steeled myself and continued downward, unsure of what awaited us below. But deep down, I felt it, the invisible threads of fate pulling us closer to the truth. Chapter 8. The Descent. The further we went down the staircase, the darker it became. I could barely see the stairs beneath my feet. Each step echoed unnaturally around us, a reminder of the emptiness that surrounded us. The whispers hung heavy in the air, almost like a chorus of unseen spirits pleading for release. I glanced at the boy, his face pale, eyebrows knit in worry. "Stay close to me," I said, feeling my own uncertainty sink deeper. My heart raced, fueled by fear and adrenaline. As we reached the bottom, a faint light flickered ahead. It was weak, but enough to guide us. We stumbled into a wide, cavernous room. The walls were damp stone, and I could see roots breaking through, twisting like gnarled fingers reaching for help. The light came from an old lantern swinging gently from a rusted chain in the center of the room. I stepped closer, drawn by its glow. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, a stark contrast to the woodsy scent from before. My instincts screamed at me to be cautious, but I needed to know what was here. "Wait." The boy pulled on my sleeve. "What if there's something dangerous?" "Then we have to be ready for it," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. But deep down, doubt clawed at my mind. The lantern swung harder, casting eerie shadows against the walls. That's when I noticed something on the ground. A series of symbols were etched into the stone floor, forming a circle. I knelt down, running my fingers over the cold surface. They looked ancient, wrong somehow. "What do you think that is?" he asked, his voice a bare whisper. "I'm not sure," I admitted. It felt like a warning, like they were meant to keep something trapped, or bring something back. Before I could gather my thoughts, something shifted in the darkness. I turned, adrenaline surging. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. The shadows coiled and unfurled, revealing strange forms that flickered in and out of sight, like figments of my imagination. "We need to go," I said, rising quickly. But before we could make a move, a cold wind burst through the room, extinguishing the lantern's light. Darkness enveloped us, thick and suffocating. I grabbed the boy's hand, my own clammy with fear. "Stay close!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. I could hear the whispers now, clearer, desperate. "Help us!" I fumbled in the dark, trying to find my way back up the staircase. A sudden sharp pain shot through my foot as I kicked something on the ground. I stumbled, nearly dragging the boy down with me. "What was that?" I gasped. It felt alive. His voice trembled. Just then, a soft glow flickered back to life, illuminating the room again. But this time, it was more than the lantern. Shadows danced along the walls, and in the center of the circle of symbols stood a figure, half-formed, like a reflection in water. I froze. "What are you?" The figure flickered, and for a fleeting moment I saw a face, twisted in agony. Then everything went dark again, and the whispers rose to a deafening crescendo. I turned to the boy. "We have to run." We bolted toward the staircase, the whispers chasing us, clear as day. Something was emerging from those symbols, and whatever it was, it wanted us. I felt the cold breath of the darkness nipping at my heels. In that moment I realized that the descent was just the beginning. We were not just escaping, we were unwittingly part of something much larger, and I had to find out what or risk being consumed by it. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. We stumbled upward, hearts pounding, each step fueled by pure desperation. The whispers of the dark chased us, echoing in the corridor behind us. My mind raced, trying to understand what we had just seen. That figure, it felt like a warning and yet an invitation. "Do you think it's following us?" the boy asked, his voice shaking. I couldn't answer. I hated the fear creeping into my heart, tightening like a vice. "Just keep moving," I urged, struggling to maintain my own facade of bravery. As we reached the top of the staircase, I paused. The dark feed from below still beckoned, the shadows flickering like candle flames, but behind us I noticed a light, a tiny pinprick of salvation. It shone from the top of the staircase, brightening the exit. "Look," I pointed, hopeful. The boy's eyes widened, and we rushed towards it, but just as we reached the doorway, a cold gust of air slammed into us. It wrapped around me like an unseen hand, urging me back toward the darkness. I stumbled, nearly losing my grip on the boy. "Don't let go," I shouted, pulling him close. In my mind, an image solidified. Those symbols, the figure. They couldn't be coincidences. Something had called us here, and we were now part of whatever it was. I needed to know what that figure wanted, if it was a warning or a beckoning. Without realizing it, I had started to step back toward the staircase. I turned to the boy. "We can't leave yet." "What? Are you crazy?" he exclaimed, panic flooding his voice. I took a breath. "We have to go back. We need answers." "Answers? Or trouble?" he countered, fear etched on his face. But I felt compelled. With a determined grip, I began walking back, dragging the boy with me. As we descended, the whispers grew louder once more. This time, I leaned in, trying to decipher the messages tangled within. "Help us. Release us. It's not too late." When we reached the cavern, the room hummed with energy. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. I turned toward the center where I'd last seen the figure. My heart lifted at the sight. It was back, shimmering with intensity, and this time, it was full-bodied. "Why are you here?" I called out, my voice steady despite the fear knotted in my stomach. The figure seemed to sway, and for a moment I could swear it reached out with an ethereal hand. "You," it whispered, the sound a chilling breeze. "You must help set us free." I stumbled back, realizing what I was facing. These weren't just lost souls. They were trapped here, bound by something far more sinister than I'd imagined. The boy tugged on my arm. "We should run." But I felt an unexpected surge of courage. "No, we have to understand." The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, all pleading, all desperate. "Find the key," they chanted, echoing inside my head. "Key?" I ventured, unsure what it meant. The figure flared briefly, illuminating a doorway hidden among the roots and stone beyond the circle of symbols. My breath caught in my throat. "It's there." The boy's grip tightened on my arm. "What if it's a trap?" I looked back at him, weighing the choices. We could leave, but we might never understand. "I can't run away from this," I whispered, feeling the weight of those lost behind me. "As if you had a choice," the figure hissed, eyes filled with sorrow and hope. That's when I heard it, a scraping sound from the shadows behind us. Another presence stirred in the darkness, and the urgency hit me like a cold wave. I glanced back toward the boy. "We have to go now." Fear washed over his face, but his nod gave me the push I needed. Together we dashed towards the beckoning doorway, uncertainty trailing in our wake. The secrets below were rising, and we were about to uncover them, whether we were ready or not. Chapter 10. The Revelation. The moment we stepped through the hidden doorway, I felt a rush of energy, an electric charge shooting through the air. I shivered, unsure if it was from excitement or dread. The room beyond the threshold opened into a vast cavern, lit with an eerie luminescence that seemed to pulse in rhythm with our heartbeats. "Stay close," I whispered to the boy, the urgency of the situation pressing on my chest like a stone. He nodded, but I could see the fear in his wide eyes, matching my own uncertainty as we took cautious steps into the underground world. The walls of the cavern were adorned with more of the swirling symbols I'd seen before, each one glowing softly in a mesmerizing dance of colors. "What do they mean?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I confessed, running my fingers over one of the carvings. The instant I touched it, a rush of memories flooded into my mind. Images of the town, the child, countless voices whispering in despair. I stumbled back, overwhelmed. "They feel alive," I murmured. With every step we took, the whispers crescendoed, each voice blending, creating an unrelenting noise that filled the cavern, drowning out everything else. "Please help us, release us," they cried, the pain lacing their words like a bitter melody. "That's why we're here," I said, trying to push the fear from my voice. "We have to help them." The boy looked at me, uncertainty etched in his features. I felt a wave of resolute determination wash over me. In the center of the cavern, I noticed a large stone pedestal, weathered and cracked but sturdy. Perched atop it was an ornate box, glimmering faintly. The whispers intensified, coiling around us, pleading. My intuition screamed. This was the key to whatever lay behind the veil of shadows. "Wait here," I instructed, turning towards the pedestal. I could feel the boy's eyes on my back, filled with concern but trust. As I approached the box, I noticed it was locked, a heavy latch keeping it shut. "What if it's dangerous?" The boy's voice quivered. "It's a risk we have to take," I replied, my own heart racing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small key I had found earlier. It felt warm against my palm, almost as if it was alive and aware of the momentous task ahead. I inserted the key into the latch, and it clicked open with an ominous sound, echoing through the chamber. Holding my breath, I lifted the lid. Inside was a shimmering orb, much like the one we had encountered in the chamber before. It radiated light, casting shadowy figures dancing along the walls. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, the voices swirling around me, a web of desperation and longing. I reached for the orb, my fingers brushing its surface. At that moment, everything fell silent. I was engulfed in a blinding light, visions crashing over me. I saw the town, the lost souls, their faces twisted in anguish, shadows lurking behind them like predators. I gasped, overwhelmed. A dreadful truth emerged. This town was bound by something dark, and the spirits were trapped, unable to escape as long as the shadow existed. "Help us." The voices pierced through the light, urging me to understand. "Who trapped you?" I shouted. "What do we need to do?" The orb pulsed, and shadows flickered to life, revealing fragments of stories. A greedy act long ago, a pact forgotten. Those who entered the town would become part of its curse, forever tied to the darkness. Then a single clear voice emerged from the chaos. "You must face the shadow." "Face it?" I echoed, confusion mixing with fear. The boy stepped closer, peering into the light. I took a deep breath, the weight of fate pressing heavily on my shoulders. "Yes," the voice replied, steady and firm. "Only by confronting the source can you free us. You hold the key." The moment we'd crossed that threshold, I had unwittingly become a player in this haunting game. I could feel the weight of the orb in my hands like a promise, but the shadow lurked, its presence tethered to my very being now. "Together?" I asked, looking down at the boy who clutched my hand tightly. His courage gave me strength. Always. With one last look at the radiant orb, I felt a rush of determination. I lifted it, ready to confront the darkness that awaited us in the cavern. As I turned, the whispers surged back, lifting as if to carry our resolve forward. Outside, the shadow moved closer, a predatory growl echoing through the cavern, mingling with our heartbeat. We charged forward together, the boy at my side, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. It was now or never. The battle was brewing, and we had to face it. Would the shadow yield, or would the whispers of the town remain forever trapped? I took one final breath, steeling myself for the confrontation as we stepped into the darkness. In the end, I escaped the town, but some questions lingered long after I returned home. I still think about the boy. Who was he really? Did we truly set the lost souls free? Or were we merely pawns in a game much larger than ourselves? The shadow still lurks in my mind, waiting. I moved far away, but the whispers follow me. They always seem to be just out of reach. I guess I'll never know the full truth,